This is Cafecito con Julissa. This is a time where I address your comments, I answer your questions, I talk about what's going on in the world, and sometimes even address the haters. For this Cafecito, I will be answering some questions from longtime supporter Sam. He's super engaged. Sam, I got you on this episode with your questions. And I will also be talking about where were Latinos during the civil rights era? Did we have a play during that time? Did we play a role during that time? And I wasn't going to quite talk about this today, but there's been so much attention around the Department of Justice's decision to end the use of for-profit prisons, which is a great thing, but they miss one very important thing, which is that for-profit detention centers will continue. They will continue to exist. A spokesperson from ICE came out and said, in fact, that they will continue to use for-profit detention centers. So those are the things we'll talk about today. So to start us off, I want to talk about where were Latinos during the civil rights movement and during the civil rights era. When I first moved to San Antonio, I wrongly assumed that racism and race relations were an exclusive dynamic between Black and white people. I didn't think that racism was something that I had to worry about. And when I was learning about the civil rights movement, I would come home to my parents, like crying, saying to them, I can't believe you brought me to a country that owned people. And there were a few things wrong with my statement. I was 11 years old, and there was a lot of things I didn't know. But of course, lots of people had slaves. It wasn't just exclusive to the US. And racism happens in Mexico. There is a large population of Afro-Mexicans who have been it's almost like they don't exist in Mexico, which is why I was never even aware of such things as a little girl living in Mexico. However, when I was learning about the civil rights movement in my textbooks, all I learned about was the struggle, the African-American struggle. And it had a very deep emotional impact on me. As I mentioned, I used to come home crying to my parents all the time. And I couldn't believe how they were treated, how African Americans were treated. And I was so inspired by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks and all of these incredible African Americans who played a huge role in the civil rights movement and in making sure that people had equal rights, all of us, not just the African American people, but it's a movement that benefited all of us. But I never learned about Latinos during that time. I never even thought we played a part in it. When people talk about Cesar Chavez now, when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school and in middle school in Texas, that was never in my textbooks. I learned about it in college from classmates and friends that were taking Chicano studies or Mexican American studies or Latin American studies. I never actually took any of those classes because I was so focused on graduating and just getting through my requirements and going out there and making some money. So I think we didn't play a part in it, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, a friend of mine this week sent me a YouTube video that I'm going to share with you guys that shows that in 1968, Mexican American high school students were organizing walkouts from their schools to boycott the schools because of the policies that the school system had. The school system banned these students from speaking Spanish, not just in the classroom, but on school grounds. They couldn't speak Spanish. And so these students got together and they organized, and about 175 of them got expelled from school for walking out and demanding better conditions in the classroom. That was in 1968, right in the middle of the civil rights movement. And these kinds of walkouts for education reform and for education equality happened in California as well, and I'm sure in other parts of the country. So the Latinos in the 1960s and in the 70s were fighting during the civil rights movement. And I know that some people might think that it's just me who didn't know, and maybe I'm ignorant and I need to learn more about it, which is what I've been doing because I didn't know about it. But the point is that this is history of the US. The Latino history and the Latino struggle is a part of the US history, and it's a history that needs to be told in classroom, not just to Latino students. It shouldn't be something that only we learn. It's something that needs to be taught in American schools, that our country needs to learn about. Our role in that movement and our role in today's world, in today's American society. And actually, this brings up another issue. Whenever we talk about the undocumented struggle and the undocumented immigrant struggle, we're actually kind of doing a similar thing to everyone else, where it seems like the undocumented narrative is a Latino narrative exclusively. And there are a lot of Black immigrants, there are a lot of white immigrants, and everything else that don't feel like their narratives fit into the immigrant rights movement. So we have to do a better job of being inclusive and including their struggle, because even though their experiences are unique and the Latino experience in the 1960s and 70s was unique, there are a lot of shared things. The struggles that we shared are similar. They're similar today among undocumented immigrants of different ethnicities. And there was a similar struggle with other ethnicities during the civil rights movement. It wasn't just African Americans, it wasn't just Latinos, it wasn't just our two communities that were fighting to be seen in this country, and that were fighting to have equal rights in this country. Discrimination has gotten all of us. It has prevailed and been evident in a lot of our communities. So I want to show you this video. It's about a 3-minute video, but it's totally worth it. Please watch the whole thing. It's this video that I mentioned that my friend sent to me, that is CBS News talking about this student walkout in Ed Couch, Texas. So please watch, and after the video is over, I'll be back to answer some questions and to talk about the Department of Justice's decision to end the use of private prisons. We'll be back. Watch this video.
Rights protest by Mexican-American students in Ed Couch, Texas has spread to 2 other locations in the Rio Grande Valley. The story of that movement from Ed Rabel.
This is the Rio Grande, which flows the length of the Rio Grande Valley. It is a lush valley of citrus groves, where Mexican-Americans, attracted by the agriculture industry, outnumber the Anglo population. The practice here has been one of domination, the Anglos dominating the Latins. But the Mexican-Americans say that day has ended, that they are on the move, that they will have a piece of the action. Mexican-American students at a school in the valley community of Ed Couch have been demonstrating for what they say are their rights. The school district expelled about 175 of the students after they staged a walkout and began the demonstrations. Later, the students presented a list of demands, one of which challenged the school's alleged policy prohibiting the speaking of Spanish on the school grounds. Why is it very important to you that you be allowed to speak Spanish on the school grounds?
Well, that's our mother tongue, so I don't see why it should be taken away from us.
We're born of Mexican-American parents, and we have to speak Spanish to them, and they want us to forget our native tongue. I don't think that's fair for us.
School officials deny charges that speaking Spanish on school grounds is prohibited, although they say they strongly encourage pupils to speak English. They also deny charges that Mexican-American students have been physically abused. At a special meeting between board members and parents, School Superintendent A.W. Bell denied the allegation that faculty members have been guilty of blatant discrimination against pupils.
I can give you the official stand of both the school board and the administration, and that is that we do not have discrimination in the school system. There may be isolated cases of discrimination that we don't know about. And I say quite frankly, if we do have them, I'd like to know about them, because we're not supposed to have them.
Well, what is the attitude of the administration toward Mexican Americans?
Well, on my opinion, they have always been pushing us, and I think it's time for us not to be pushed around so much like they have.
They want you to say, well, I regret what I've done, and I won't do it again. They want you to do that in order to get back into school. Will you do that?
No, I won't.
Why?
Because, I don't feel sorry for what I did. I think it's right.
The school dispute exemplifies the new spirit pervading Mexican Americans who live along this river. The Mexican Americans here hope their new spirit will bring a better life to them. Ed Rabel, CBS News, in the Rio Grande Valley.
A federal judge has ruled those school suspensions invalid, pending individual hearings for each student. A state of emergency was declared today in Newark, New Jersey, after about half the city's police and firemen called in sick to press demands for higher pay. City officials support the demand.
And we're back. I hope that you enjoyed that video. For me, it was such an eye-opening video. A couple of my favorite things out of the video were, one, that it said that Mexican Americans are on the move, and they are on the move to claim a piece of the pie, and that the new spirit of the Mexican Americans along the Rio Grande was the spirit that they hoped would give them a better life. And I hope that the new spirit of today's Latinos will give us a better life. So next, I want to address some questions from a longtime supporter, super engaged supporter. Thank you, Sam, for being such an awesome person and always commenting and asking questions and sharing my post. Thank you so much for that. One of the questions that you asked is, how does it feel to have papers? For those of you that aren't totally familiar, I was undocumented for 15 years, and on August 8th of 2014, I became an American citizen. And I was incredibly happy and proud to become an American citizen, and it was an incredible feeling of freedom, because one of the most painful things for me about being undocumented was not being able to go back to Mexico, not being able to be with my family, even in some of the moments that you hope that you'll be able to share with your family. When my dad passed away, I wasn't able to see him alive ever again because I was here and he was in Mexico. So having papers definitely gave me a sense of freedom, and it made everyday life a lot easier. You mentioned in your comments that even getting a driver's license is difficult, and yeah, I mean, I drove 10 years without a driver's license, and it was tough. It was really tough having to drive back and forth from Austin to San Antonio without a license, and just being fearful that I might get pulled over and I might get deported if I get pulled over. So having papers definitely gave me a sense of freedom. It made everyday life easier. It's making me feel like I finally can take full part in a society and in the economy, and to contribute fully to a country that I have considered my home for a long, long time. So those are all the really great things about having papers. I think that as a Latina and as a Mexican American, there are times when my papers don't shield me from anything. Racism, discrimination, like all those things don't go away just because I have an American passport now. I wrote about this in my blog about a year ago now, that I went to a store on Rodeo Drive, actually off Rodeo Drive. Like, this store wasn't even on Rodeo Drive, so like, excuse me, you're not even on Rodeo Drive. But I went to the store and I was trying on a necklace, and the sales associate took the necklace from me and asked me if I knew what Prada was, because she assumed that because of the way that I look, because of the way that I was dressed. And by the way, I wasn't like slumming it. Like, I mean, I wasn't like super dressed up, but I was there to shop, not to like go out. So anyways, whatever about my appearance gave her the impression that I couldn't afford that necklace. So things like that happen whether or not you have papers. And I think, part of what I'm really trying to do now is, of course, to be an advocate for immigrant rights, to be an advocate for immigration reform, but also to really advance the opportunities that the Latino community has, and that I hate this word minorities, but that minorities have in this country. So in some ways, I mean, listen, I would rather have a woman at a store tell me I can't afford a necklace and be able to go home to see my mom than not. But not all of my problems have gone away just because I have papers. And something that I haven't talked very publicly about is the fact that my family is still very much impacted by our broken immigration system. My mom was hit with the 10-year ban. She was trying to come visit me in New York when I lived in New York about 9 years ago. And her tourist visa got revoked because when she was trying to cross the border with a tourist visa, they somehow knew that she had lived here before with her tourist visa, and so they revoked it. And she still can't come visit me. I have family that's living in the U.S. who are undocumented, who would have benefited from DAPA. So the struggle continues, man. Like, it's not over. And it's not just over, like, in general. Like, the struggle's not over in general. The struggle's not over within my own family and in my own life. So I hope that answers some of your questions. And yes, a lot of your questions that you posted will be answered in the book. I hope that you will join me September 13th at the Strand Bookstore. I know I send you a personal message, and I hope that all of you who are in New York City will come out to the Strand Bookstore September 13th for the official release of my first book, My Underground American Dream. So to close this off, I want to briefly talk about the Department of Justice's decision to end the use of for-profit private prisons. And I think this is a great thing. It is an amazing thing that has happened. Prisons should not be for profit because the only way prisons make money in that case is when there are prisoners there. So there's no incentive to keep people out of prisons. It's quite the opposite. And there's a great danger whenever you have private prisons running our correctional facilities. So it's a great thing that has happened. However, one of my concerns in this policy negotiations to reform the criminal justice system, including ending the use of for-profit private prisons, is that immigrants are becoming casualties of the policy negotiations. Why weren't detention centers included in this decision? I understand that it's two different agencies that would make that decision. The Department of Justice is who made the decision to end the use of private prisons, federal private prisons. The Department of Justice did that. And is the Department of Homeland Security who would have to say the same thing about detention centers. Detention centers are some of the worst for-profit private prisons. The National Immigration Law Center just did this really informative in-depth report about what goes on in those private detention centers, and they are horrible. There are videos and there are images of a woman changing her baby's diaper in prison next to a trash can. That is what's happening in our country in those private detention centers. So I just really hope that we aren't going around taking victory laps, clapping that private prisons are over, that they're done, because they are not. While detention centers continue to be a for-profit business, then that means that private prisons still exist. And we cannot say, well, the Department of Justice is now gonna shut down the 13 federal prisons and that are for profit, and therefore we can hang up our shoes and say next issue. No, we have to continue to remind them that detention centers that are for profit must also end. And just recently there was a report in the Washington Post, I'll put a link below in the comments, that talks about the $1 billion contract that was given to build new detention centers. $1 billion contract. And for those of you that don't have the same views as me on immigration, fine. But two things. One, your tax dollars are going to pay for that. And number two, just take a look at the images, take a look at the videos. And I don't care what your view on immigration is. If you're okay with what is happening in this country at those prisons to women and to children, then we're doomed. We're just doomed as humanity. So good thing that the Department of Justice doesn't want to use for-profit prisons anymore. However, we have to continue to demand that the same thing happens for-profit private detention centers that are currently housing. I can't even just said that. It's not housing, not housing. They are like in prison. These little kids and these moms and these children are in prison at these private detention centers. So I'm not taking a victory lap. I am not giving them a clap. I will continue to demand that the same thing happens for detention centers. So, by the way, today is not a cafecito. It's a chai tea, which is delicious. And this cup is from Indian Hills Community College, where I gave a speech in Iowa last fall, which was a great place to give a speech. There were some interesting things that I saw on the way from the airport to where I gave the speech, but we'll save that for another conversation. Thank you so much as always for listening. Please post your questions, your comments. If anything I said doesn't sound right, let me know. I'll address it next time. If you want to know more about private detention centers, if you want to know more about the Latinos in the 1960s and 70s that were fighting during the civil rights movement, anything else you want to know about, just send me your questions, comments, and I will be sure to get to them. I cannot believe that I am less than a month away from releasing my first book, My Underground American Dream. I hope that you will pick up a copy, pre-order a copy today. And if you're in New York City, again, I invite you to join me at the Strand Bookstore on September 13th at 7 p.m. for a reading, a conversation, and a book signing. And I am also coming to Washington, D.C., to Austin, to Houston, to San Antonio, to Los Angeles. Check out my website, julissaarce.com, for all of the stops that I'm making this fall. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time for the next cafecito or the next chai tea. Who knows? Have a great day.